As I'm recording this episode, grandbaby number 5 will be born soon. And by the time you listen to this, she might have been born. We're actually hoping, because that will mean that my daughter is just about overdue if she's not born by the time this is recorded. But I just wanted to let you know that it's an exciting time for us here. As you listen to the rest of this interview with Kody Hanner about homeschooling and homesteading and wondering, is it worth it? Well, I think for both of us, for both me and Kody, we would say it's worth it. Now that my daughter, my oldest daughter, who I homeschooled from the time she was 4, is now homeschooling her own kids. And all that time, that investment that I put into her and seeing her return that to her children, it's just a wonderful thing. So if you're wondering if it's worth it to homeschool and homestead, I say yes. Remember to go and listen to episode 63 before this one, because it's part 1, and this is part 2, episode 64.
So my grandpa grew up in the Depression in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And then he moved to California, and he always had a garden. He always canned all of his stuff. Like he himself, like he wasn't having his wife do it or anything. He was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom always had a garden, but she never canned anything. And I asked her why, and she goes, I don't have time for that stuff. I only want the fresh vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I'm like, well, I want to can. I want to learn how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm completely self-taught on how to can. I've never had anyone like teach me how to do that. And there's still things that I don't love doing with the canning, like broth. I hate canning broth.
Mm-hmm.
And because I make so much of it, I just make sure that I'm always doing broth every couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather have fresh. And if I think I made too much, I'll freeze it. And then it's handy because I'll go through that faster than it's ever worth it to me to put it in the pantry. But then things that are completely seasonal, like my fruits and stuff, those I'll go ahead and can. Or, the neighbors called one day, they had a permit for a depredation elk, and they killed an elk in the middle of the night, and they didn't want it. And they're like, do you guys want it?
Mm-hmm.
I canned a lot of elk that next week because we did not have room in our freezers, but I wasn't turning down 1,000 pounds of meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those skills are so important to learn. And my mother-in-law was actually the one that grew up in the Depression. She was, they've since passed, my in-laws, but my husband they were like in their 40s when they had my husband. So
that was kind of, my grandpa, I think, was 40 when my mom was born. And then my mom was almost 40 when I was born. So.
Okay. Yeah. So she's the one, my mother-in-law is the one that taught me how to can. She taught me how to crochet. She was the one. And I love that. And that's what a community can do as well. Like you can learn from each other, since we don't have the generations. A lot of times we don't have those generations. We have people who have dove into certain skills and we can teach each other. So I said earlier, it's like we're teaching each other, like newbies are teaching each other, but that's not a bad thing. The community is really important.
Well, and we're learning the modern ways of doing it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of things we don't have to do anymore. There's a lot of things we've learned, even in food safety when it comes to canning that they didn't do 100 years ago that could make all of us really sick. So
right, exactly.
I'm glad that we have those.
Yeah, me too. I'm all for my conveniences too. Like there's some conveniences. I like a washing machine. I don't want to get rid of a washing machine. I could technically live without a dryer, but not like a washing machine. And so there's things like that, like we don't have to, like you said, it's modern homesteading. So we're defining it. We're still defining what that means because it's pretty young, if you think
it
about
is.
it. Mm-hmm.
And, there's, like we were saying, everybody has their own skills and they can help provide to each other in the communities.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a big bread maker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the mental capacity, the time, or the energy to stand in there and knead bread for hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I do make a ton of bread. I just use my bread machine.
Mm-hmm.
I run it on the dough cycle. When it pops out, I split it into 2 loaves. I knead it again, split it into 2 loaves, let it rise again, and make my bread.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need for me to stand there and knead my bread for hours, but I am so happy to go sit out in my garden and weed for hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think just everybody has their things that they're interested in. We don't have to do it all. And they didn't do it all back then. That's really a utopian concept.
Yeah, that's true. I try to remind people about that. Like people back then didn't want to be alone. Like I don't think that was like self
No.
sufficiency was like they had, space between them, acres and acres, but that was, I don't know. It's for some reason our society is all into like self-sufficiency, and it's not just like the homesteading space. It's like being able to do things on your own is seen as something to be sought after, but we really need each other, and it's not healthy to be without each other.
It's not, we're herd animals. And I mean, think about that poor goat that you bought and put out in the field, and it bad incessantly for, days until you realized you needed to go buy another goat. So.
Or think about the times people isolate themselves and they actually go crazy. Like they, like there's something to that. Sorry.
Although I could definitely use some more isolation. I'm going crazy with all the people in my house.
Yeah, moms need a special time for themselves. Otherwise,
that's, I think, why I love weeding the garden. As soon as I say I'm going to go weed the garden, the kids scatter, and I can put in my headphones and go out there and listen to a podcast or a book.
Yeah.
But now that they're getting a little older, like the 14-year-olds, they see the like joy and solitude in it. So they want to come out and do it with me, and then they can't stand themselves. They have to start talking. I'm like, that's great. Special. Go weed the other garden. We have two,
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's see. Okay, so you have, what is the name of your book, by the way?
So I have a couple different ones. I call it Homestead Science. I have Little Learners Edition, Build Your Own Homestead, which is for little kids to just kind of be exposed to homestead concepts, to rural communities, and just where their food comes from. But while they're working through the book, they get that long-term goal planning because they're actually designing their own homestead on a poster. Then I have my junior high and high school book, which is also the one that a lot of adults buy. And that's called Introduction to Homestead Science. And I mean, that's a 300-page textbook on 18 units that starts with how to buy land, goes into animal science, plant science, soil science, home sciences, off-grid life, herbalism, first aid, and then business account or, homestead accounting. And while they work through that book, they have a planner that they do some regular lessons in, vocabulary and math and those types of things. But then they're also researching and planning each part of their homestead. And at the end of it, when they do the accounting, they are able to tell if they had a profitable homestead or not and how they can make those changes in future years.
Wow. I didn't realize it was all that. That sounds really amazing and actually something that my listeners could really benefit from. So listen, you guys.
I really created it to be something that I wish I would have had when I was learning myself.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realize it. I didn't know what it was because I don't have it. But I didn't realize it was something that an adult could actually really benefit from. I mean,
I have a lot of adults who buy my high school version.
Yeah. I don't know if this was you at all, but I used my homeschooling books as education for myself over the years. I mean, I was learning a lot alongside my children. And so this sounds like the perfect idea for someone who does want to homeschool and learn how to create a sustainable homestead, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was, I consulted on small farms for a long time. That was part of my corporate job. And that really made it where it was easy to turn my homestead into a business right away. And so that's one thing that I definitely teach in there, whether they want to make a profit off their homestead or if they just want their homestead to be sustainable. And then also a lot of families, because there is this big homestead wave they're starting themselves and their kids are starting at the same time. It's one that the whole family can do together. I mean, you can have the little kids, the older kids, and the parents all learning at the same time.
Would you call this, for those that are familiar with homeschooling, would you call
Mhm.
this like a unit study?
No.
No.
Um, unit studies are definitely they're short term, usually, 6 to
Mhm.
12 weeks, and it's set up, like for different levels of learning. This is a full year curriculum.
Okay.
The 18 units are 2 weeks long a piece. Some people can move through it at different paces. I know some people that are stretching it out for a 2-year process, because they want to learn a little slower. It takes 36 weeks to do, both for the younger version and the older version. I just definitely have it set up where the whole family can learn together and that you can start at any place. Because as homeschoolers, sometimes we school year round. As homesteaders, sometimes our homestead schedule doesn't match everybody else's homestead schedule.
Mhm.
So I always tell people, if you're starting this curriculum in the spring and you're planting your garden, don't bother with the animal units. Jump right into the garden unit and then,
Mm.
you know, go move around as needed. The only thing I suggest is if there's vocabulary words you aren't familiar with, maybe look those up in the back.
Mhm. Okay. That's so great. I love this idea. And I hope more and more people learn about it because,
Well, thank
um,
you. I really appreciate that.
yeah, it could be, I feel like the start of a lot of homesteaders, like you were saying before, people are getting in kind of in over their heads. And I think if we just go back and just start teaching people from the beginning, like,
Mhm.
you know, what it should at least give them a good platform and a good start, then a lot of these problems that come up, like not being able to afford the lifestyle you just created,
Mhm.
or getting in over your head with so many different projects.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Mhm.
I always teach people master one at a time till it no longer
Mhm.
feels like work, it just feels like life.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I'm probably going to use it. I'm going to quote that for you. But Kody Hanner. You were talking about speaking at conferences, and you're going to be speaking. When is that one? The Modern Homestead Conference? When is
So
that?
that's in 2 weeks.
Okay, so I'm not sure if this podcast episode
Okay.
will be
I'm speaking
before
at
that.
Ozarks in August,
Okay.
and then, I'll be at HOA with Homesteaders of America with a booth, and I'm a sponsor for that one.
Okay.
And then I'll be at the Indiana Homestead Conference as a speaker. I'll be speaking twice there.
Okay. Awesome. That's so great that you do the speaking. How did that come about? Just because you had the curriculum and people asked you?
Yeah, when they decided to do the Modern Homestead Convention here in Idaho, um, I heard about it through Melissa K. Norris, and I applied to be a vendor right away because I was like, well, this is my home place.
Mhm.
Like, I want to be a vendor. I want to meet with my people. And then I took off to be a vendor at Homesteaders of America 2 weeks later. And when I went to check in, this gal was like, "Oh, you're Kody. I was wanting to talk to you." And I was like, "Who
Mhm.
are you?" And it was Katie Milhorn, who is running the conference with Melissa K. Norris.
Okay.
And she was like, "We saw that you applied to be a vendor, but we want you to speak at it." And I had just released my second curriculum and went to Homesteaders of America, and people were recognizing me. And I was just really blown away. I didn't
Mhm.
realize that I had made an impact yet.
Mhm.
I'd had my curriculum out for a year, but it was just for younger kids. And I was really surprised that I'd made that big of an impact already. And it kind of just snowballed from there. I said, wow, I do have something that people want to hear.
Mhm.
And I started just promoting myself. And I've now spoken at 5 homeschool conferences.
Nice.
And now I'm moving into homestead season.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice that those two things go really well together,
Mhm.
homeschooling and homesteading.
They
They
really
both
do.
have,
And,
yeah.
like I said, I'm kind of new on the scene. And I went to the first workshop I was speaking at a homeschool conference in Missouri, and that room was standing room only.
Wow.
I mean, there was people sitting on the floor, there was people out in the hallway, and I was just shocked by what I saw.
Mhm. Yeah.
Scared the crud out of me.
Yeah. That's funny. That would me too. I
Right.
would be the same way.
I was like,
Um,
wow, you all are so nice. I hope you're prepared to be disappointed. No.
I'm sure you did amazing, and obviously people are needing this message. I shared that I homeschooled for 25 years, and now my daughter is homeschooling my grandkids. So
Mm,
it's such a, I mean, the influence can be strong, and you know, especially if the kids have a really good experience, if the kids who are moving on to the next generation, teaching the next generation have a
yeah,
good experience. And I feel like your curriculum can make that happen for a lot of people with the homesteading and homeschooling combination, you know.
that's really my hope. I plan on continuing creating more curriculum so that this can be something that people stick with over the years.
Hmm.
I am coming out with Homestead History in the fall, which will be a full year US history based on food and ag sociology.
Oh, nice. Nice. That sounds history. I always enjoyed history, but I never like in school felt like anybody taught it very well. Like I did
And I
never
never felt
had,
like any
yeah,
of it applied to us.
yeah,
They say you
yeah.
have to learn history so you don't repeat it. Well, I am not a war general, so I doubt that I'll repeat any of their mistakes.
Right.
But why weren't we learning? I mean, I remember learning about famine and stuff,
Hmm.
but they didn't put it into context for us. They would teach us about a famine, in I don't even know, a bazillion years ago.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then, 2 years later, you learn about the Great Depression.
Hmm.
But at what point did they say that we have had, a famine every 1,000 years all the way up and to even closer in times
Hmm.
because we were making the same mistakes with our soils and the same mistakes with our population. And this happened as recently as, I mean, when we were kids 50 years ago.
Hmm.
So why isn't that more of a conversation?
Hmm.
The
That's so
way
true.
our, corporate food system has come to place, how our food and nutrition has affected those wars that they taught us about in school.
Hmm.
And that's what I really want to teach people, like kind of how we've gone full circle where we're at right now to from where we were 100 years ago.
Hmm. That's amazing. That's so. I think I might need to buy that book because
Well,
I'd
that's
love.
the hope is I wanted it to be a
Yeah.
reader for
Hmm.
new homesteaders, but then also to teach it to kids in a different concept
Hmm.
so that even if they're only using mine for 1 year and then circle back and take like a US government class, that a lot of this is more applicable to the kids and is
Hmm.
something that they embrace on a bigger level.
Right. Nice. Well, okay. I always give my listeners the opportunity to understand the negatives of a particular topic.
Okay.
So, as you know, sometimes I ask what's the pros and cons, like what's the cons of homesteading? So, what would be the negative or the challenges as a homesteading, homeschooling mom or living that life?
Um, I would say the challenges is finding time for everything.
Mhm.
We always take the spring off from homeschool to be able to plant. We do it in the fall as well for harvest and hunting season.
Mhm.
And then we focus on school in the winter and summer when the weather's too bad to be outside as much.
Mhm.
Um, but sometimes I realize, oh my gosh, it has been weeks since we've done anything educational. And I know that so much of what we're doing on the farm and in life and running our businesses that our kids are learning,
Mhm.
but it's a constant battle of balancing that.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally can relate to that. And when my youngest graduated, I felt like I just said, "Oh, I'm finally done with being responsible for someone's education."
Right. Like, I said that we didn't start out as homeschoolers, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to teach a child to read for the first time.
Mhm.
And I feel like I am in over my head.
Mm. Yeah, that was hard for me the first time as well with but
Mhm.
my oldest daughter happened to be like kind of like she was ahead. So she picked up things really, really fast. But then my son was just like a normal boy. And
Mhm.
I tried to make him like her and thinking
Oh,
that
yeah,
he would pick it up as fast. But he didn't because he was a normal boy, but he was really good at physical stuff. Like he could
right?
do so much physical stuff that she couldn't do even at they were about 3 years apart. And so it's just like knowing that you have to know your child and their pace and their abilities and just work with them. And that's kind of like the beauty of homeschooling as well, is that you match their education to the child and stuff. And whether
For
they're
sure. I mean,
whether they're advanced or just normal or behind or whatever it is.
well, that's my 5-year-old he's almost 6 now, and he's really upset with me that he's almost 6 and doesn't know how to read.
Mm.
He's upset with me over it.
Yeah.
He's very advanced, and I try to teach him how to read in a traditional method, like, just working through a curriculum for his age.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all, for example, rhyming.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll show him 2 pictures, it's bee and tree. And he's like, "Is that a yellow jacket?" I'm like, "No, it's a bee." And he's like, "A honeybee or a carpenter bee?" I'm like, "It's just a bee."
I love that.
We're trying to work through like bad, sad, dad, that type of thing. And I'm like, he couldn't figure out that. So I'm like, well, I'll try questions. Who can, what happens? Why do you get sent to timeout? Because I was naughty? And I'm like, no, because you were bad. And he's like, oh. I'm like, no, who can send you to timeout? My father. No, your dad.
That's hilarious.
And so I'm really, really struggling with that piece with him. So I'm actually thinking about jumping ahead a year where they actually start working on word recognition rather than letter recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And he might just put those pieces together for himself.
Yeah. Well, are you familiar with, oh gosh, I can't remember the name. It's the writing curriculum. Oh, I can't remember the name, but he wrote writing curriculum and reading, that was his thing. And his son was 10 years old before he really learned how to read.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, for him, it was like, okay, I'm teaching kids how to write and my kid doesn't. I might have parts of the story wrong, but anyway, it was something like that. And but what he did was have his son just listen to stories. So I got that this was at the time when my youngest was learning how to read as well. So I got that LibriVox. Have you ever heard of LibriVox app? It's an app that has like commercial-free type books that are read. People read them.
Okay.
So it has readers, but they're all volunteers. So they're books that are open. What do you call that? Open to the public type of books.
Yeah.
So they're a lot of the classics. Anyway, he said that he would, I don't know if he shared that particular thing with me, but he shared that he would allow his son to just listen to stories. Wherever he was doing it, he was playing, he was listening to stories. Anyway, I'd started doing that with my daughter, and because it wasn't like she was really behind, but she wasn't interested. But she loved to listen, and she loved to listen while she was doing something else. So she listened to Heidi, the story of Heidi, like 2 or 3 times. And then she had some other ones that she really liked. She found readers that she liked, like certain people who were reading them, because some are very like not very good. They would just, this is all volunteer. So the good readers were really sought after. And so she found a couple readers that she really liked and would listen to those stories. And she would just be playing, but she would get teary-eyed at Heidi. The story of Heidi. And I still have never actually listened to it or read it. But just like reading to your kids, like that's a huge thing for them to understand how language is put together and recognize. But I mean, obviously your son is like advanced in comprehension, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think even this conversation right here goes to show what we were talking about in this whole episode is how community for each other helps. We're down to talk about homeschooling, and you're giving me advice on helping my child because you have already gone through those steps that I haven't.
Yeah, that is
And I
the
think
beauty.
that's why we need a community so much.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess we'll end it on that. But I do want to know, like, where can my listeners find you? Where can they get your curriculum and learn more about what you have to offer?
So you can find me at the Homestead Education. Make sure you put the in there. Fun domain name stuff. I'm also on social media under the Homestead Education, both Facebook and Instagram. And then, of course, my podcast, which, again, you can find all on my website.
Yeah, and you have a lot of great interviews on your podcast. I just see them
Mhm.
coming. I don't get to listen to every one. I listen to
There's no
podcasts.
time for that.
I know. I listen to homesteading and that type of thing on the weekends, and I listen to
Mhm.
business on the weekdays. So sometimes I don't get to all my homesteading ones, but I've seen the names and all the
Mhm.
great interviews that you've had up recently. Actually, I just published Laura Cox. I had an
Oh, wow.
interview with her. So today, episode 54, Laura Cox, who talks about rabbits, is on my podcast as well. And I just saw that
Yes,
you had her on there too.
I did. We met at a conference. Well, we've met at a couple different conferences and come full circle because we were both completely uninterested in each other in the
Yeah.
beginning. And we met again at a conference and realized that we just absolutely hit it off. So
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, she seems very, very nice and sweet. I mean, we had a great conversation. So,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation because I feel
Me
like
too.
it's so much part of my life, like the
Mhm.
homeschooling. I don't get to talk about homeschooling as much with people because not everybody who's homesteading is homeschooling. So when I get to talk about both of them, it just feels like, now, if you were to talk to me about horses as well, that would have been like the perfect conversation. I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's funny. But, I get it because honestly, I'm a homesteader. That is my
Mhm.
space. But I created a homestead homeschool curriculum. So everybody wants to talk about homeschooling. And I'm like, I want to talk about the animals.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's nice when we can have several ways that we connect. And so this was a really great conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to it.
Remember, all the links are in the show notes, so go check those out and check out what Kody has to offer. If you're interested in a really good curriculum, I suggest you check it out. And that's it. Just remember, the Homestead Income Plan group is going and is ready for you to join, so don't forget to join that. And I hope you have a wonderful day.